Let's start with a little bit of an icebreaker.
Okay.
You talk a lot about red flags and green flags and stuff like that. So I thought it would be fun if I gave you 3 scenarios, and you have a red flag, a green flag, and a beige flag.
Okay.
And you cannot reuse any of them.
Oh, so I can only use one once. That's tricky.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're just 2 people talking.
Okay,
Where's
let's
the
go
fun
for
in
it.
that?
Let's
Okay.
go for it.
All right. He's 30 and still kisses his mother on the lips.
Okay, I need to think about that one. By default, you would say probably that's a red flag. But it depends, because how we view our relationship with our parents, from individualistic societies to collectivistic societies, can differ. And so even calling your mom every day for 10 minutes, some people could see as a red flag. Say, oh, that's mama's boy, right? For other people, it said, no, that's someone who cares about their family a lot, and I appreciate that. So culture plays a very big role in there. Society also kind of plays a big role in that as well. So I would say that is a beige flag. Does everyone know what a beige flag is? It's kind of like, it's like a pet peeve, but when you think about it, it actually is not something you should be bothered with. So that's what we call a beige flag. So let's keep it to that one.
Okay, I thought that was a definite red flag.
No.
I think.
I know he's tricking me. It's like a psychology class.
You know
right?
what? I studied psychology too. Okay, like you cannot mess with me. I think it's like a definite red flag if you're moving your mom's hair behind her ear first. If there's George Michael playing,
that's a bit weird indeed.
If there's George Michael playing, that's a real problem.
I don't know about that one either.
All right, the next one. She rejected me because of my star sign.
Oh, okay. I feel that don't you feel like the third one is going to be something that I have to say it's a red flag? I'm going to say that this is a green flag.
This is a green flag.
Yes.
Okay.
Why? Because there's a lot of people that care about astronomy. And look, honestly, it's not the reason why you should reject somebody. I don't think so. However, do you know that 2/3 of psychologists, by the way, are atheists? Did anyone know that? Most psychologists are not spiritual. It has to do with, of course, the history of psychology. So in that perspective, I would have normally said it's a red flag, but a lot of people do care about astronomy. Mm-hmm. And in some degree, we could almost say that there's some traits that I can often think, hey, that's interesting. Now, is it a good thing to do? No, but I just feel this is a trick question. So I'm going to say it's a green flag.
For me, this is a beige flag. I don't really, astrology does not play a role in my life. Mostly because I was born in July, and it's really awkward to say I'm a Cancer. It's kind of like, that's not nice to say. It feels kind of gross coming out of my mouth. But yeah, I mean, I think,
So you're very emotional.
Sure.
That's what they say about Cancer.
Why did you say that? All right, last one. Still friends with their ex.
Oh, I don't have any. I have to say red flag now, right? Because you told me I can only use one.
Look,
no, okay.
You blew it by saying kissing your mom on the lips was fine.
I told you. Okay. I didn't say. Well, it is what it is. Look, it's interesting. It depends. I feel if you move on, and you might find someone else, you might be still emotionally attached to an ex. It's good to kind of let go of an ex. But I can imagine if you've had a really good relationship with each other, and your relationship kind of seeped out, it just ended, but you're still really, really good friends, because maybe one of the basis was that you were friends because that's one of the reasons why you were together, then I don't see a problem with it. But there are times, especially when you move on to see someone else, or you have a relationship with someone else, I think sometimes it's kind of, to honor your other relationship, it's kind of good to kind of let go. And maybe in the future, you can become friends again, or you can be connected again. But I think, it depends on the situation. Sometimes it's a green flag, and sometimes it's a red flag.
For me, I think this is not always, but generally a green flag. I think it shows that, there's no hatred, there's no bridges burned, no scorched earth, so...
We should also ask the new partner what they think about that.
Yeah, true.
So let's do it.
And then if she rejects you because of your star sign, then you're really screwed.
Yeah, exactly. So let's do a quick test here. I love to do this also when I speak about red flags and green flags. So in this question, raise your hands up if you think being friends with your ex, just after you broke up, staying friends with your ex is a green flag. Oh, a lot of them don't. Raise your hands if it's a red flag. Oh, 50-50. Okay, interesting.
Beige flag?
Beige flag? We're in the middle.
Democracy works, everybody. Okay, cool. Now, yesterday, you and I had a brief chat.
Yes, we did.
You caught one of the other sessions that I was
Yes.
that I was running.
Yeah.
Who saw the talk yesterday with Martin Jan Stransky, where he was talking about the harm that social media and technology is doing to our brains? Some of you. Okay.
Oh.
You had some thoughts.
Yes, I do. I loved his presentation because I, as a behavioral psychologist, I also look at the impact. Since 2017, I've been investigating how technology impacts the mind, how it impacts our brain and our behavior. And so a lot of things he said, what technology is doing to us, and now we're learning more about ChatGPT, LLMs, and how it's impacting us, etc. Algorithms do have an impact, but again, it's kind of like the unintended, consequence of technology. He said something that technology is used mainly to make profits, but we don't think about the negative effects of technology. But he said something towards the end. He said, what's the solution here? The only solution here is to put the technology away and don't use your mobile phone. I think that's absolutely rubbish. I think we live in a world that is so digital that our lives are being impacted by screens. It's not the what. It really is the how. We have the technology today, but the question is, how do we build a stronger and more healthier relationship with that technology? And that's kind of where I feel like where the behavioral science can come in and help to explain what's happening. But the bigger question is, how can we then use that technology in a much more healthier way once we understand the positive and the negative effects of that technology?
That's something I wanted to ask you, because isn't it possible that technology, well, it's not possible, it's a fact. Isn't it true that technology is advancing faster than our ability, our cognitive ability to catch up with it and to adjust to living with it in a healthy way?
Yeah, absolutely. Technology, especially AI, is advancing so rapidly. That I always say, as AI advances rapidly, our understanding of the impact of AI on us is declining rapidly.
Yeah.
And so this gap between the advancement and our understanding is so significant. I mean, that's where the biggest challenges are, but also at the same time, the biggest opportunities. And that's why I kind of feel that behavioral science and psychology can help us to come up with answers. I've written a couple of scientific articles on this exact topic. And I explain that behavioral science and psychology can actually be a potential understanding and pathway to better understand how we can deal with the advancement, because we can't follow every single advancement that happens with AI, but we can learn how to build a better relationship with it. So ethics is really important, responsible usage is really important. And I feel that, we always talk about technology as the next big thing, but I don't believe the next big revolution in technology is going to be technological. I actually think that the next big thing, next revolution in technology is going to be psychological. Our relationship with AI, understanding the impact it's going to have on us. And I feel that that needs to be further emphasized. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So tell me about the problems that people are facing today, which they didn't in the past.
In which perspective?
In terms of relationships, or in terms of our relationship with technology, what is novel to, let's say, the last 10 years?
Well, in human relationships, I think that the novel aspect here, there's two things here. I think social dynamics has really impacted our relationships with people. So not just only partners and dating, but also the workplace and friendships. And, we've become much more focused on ourselves, I feel. Look, what's really important from a human understanding perspective is that human relationships are so foundational to our health, to our mental health, to so many factors. We're creatures of social habit, right? We need to be together with other people. Now, technology is mediating that relationship. So nowadays, we connect with people. A lot of people that have kids, 15, 16-year-old kids, they're calling the people that they meet on games like PS5 and whatever, they're calling them their friends. Mm-hmm. And so I think that how we form relationships with people is changing, but at the same time, this technology facilitated kind of connection between people is also negatively, to some degree, negatively affecting how we perceive people and how the value that we put into a person. And I think that's something that's changing.
Doesn't that start with the language that these companies are using? Because if you're gaming online, it says, you have however many friends online.
Right.
On social media. It's like, how many friends do you have? How many followers do you have? Twitter started this follower thing back, 15 years ago. And oh my God, I have followers now, so I must be pretty goddamn important.
Well, I don't know if you have followers. Yeah, you do have followers also in the gaming platform, but I think the perspective of our lives are becoming much more not introverted, but our lives are becoming much more focused on solitude. It's more focused on yourself. We're prioritizing, I call this in my book also Red Flags, Green Flags, I talk about the me generation and why we're so much focused on ourselves. It almost becomes like so safe to focus on yourself. Relationship, you break up, what happens? Oh, I prefer to focus on myself, it's safer to do. But again, we develop a social muscle, and through our social interactions with other people, being challenged on something, being rejected during a date, all of those factors that help us to build our social muscle, our mental muscle around that, we can lose because we're just so much focused on that kind of interaction online. Say, for example, you go on a date. Hey, in the good old days when we went on a date, I mean, some of us still do that. Don't you agree? We had to dress up, we had to look nice, we had to comb our hair, we had to be on our best behavior, we had to be rejected, right? And nowadays, no one wants to get rejected anymore. It's swipe left, swipe right. And I think we're losing that effort process. There's multiple reasons, psychological reasons, what's negatively impacting our ability to connect with other people. However, I also at the same time believe it's a natural evolution of human relationships. And I think it's really good to understand the good and the bad when it comes to human relationships. And again, once we understand what doesn't work, the question is, as a behavioral scientist, how can I improve that?
Well, let's go back to the good and bad that you just mentioned. What I've noticed is that there's people are getting really comfortable with like therapy speak. And I think that that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
By and large.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned earlier, I think it also takes away from their own like responsibility for their own actions.
Absolutely.
And you know, just painting someone with a very convenient brush
as a narcissist, or
as a narcissist.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Can you tell me about what that's done for you as a mental health professional?
Well, I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a behavioral psychologist, right? So it's a bit different than a mental health. You know, that's a bit different. It's a much more broader spectrum. Look, the key thing here to understand is therapy speak. We live in a world where we're almost trained, we're heralded for making quick and fast decisions, right? You make a quick decision, oh, you're switched on. That's what they call you nowadays. So in a world that's rapidly changing, we want to have quick answers. That's why sometimes the red and green flags, that's why I wrote the book, to give you clear understanding of what is healthy and unhealthy behavior. However, when we make quick decisions, you know, by default, we can lead into biases, into quick reactions, which actually can trip us up. So I think it's also really important to sometimes slow down the thinking, because social media, and we're not doing that, and also that's why in the book I talk about red and green, not just as labels, but also as a process.
Yeah, starting point.
Yeah, so starting point. So red actually means reflect, engage, and decide. Don't run away when you see the very first red flag. Engage with it, you know, say, oh, wait a minute, why is this a red flag? Because maybe it's an indication that you might be a red flag, for example, right? So I think that's, we need to become more aware of that. And so that process and understanding, I add that in the book. Now, let's be clear. It's so easy to label someone as a narcissist nowadays or a psychopath. Generally speaking, if you look at the general population, 1% of the general population are narcissists, right, or have narcissistic personality disorder. Psychopathy, exactly the same thing. So if you look at the probability, there's only 1% that someone actually is and has that disorder. But that's not for you to decide. That's for a mental health professional to decide. Now, the second thing is people can have narcissistic traits or psychopathic traits. We all, by the way, we all have narcissistic traits. We all have psychopathic traits, Machiavellian traits, but to a very low degree that is not therefore considered a behavioral disorder. Yeah. And so I think we need to be a bit more mindful about that. And I also mentioned that in the book. Watch out with calling someone a narcissist, because first of all, the chances of them being that is not large, but we have to be a little bit more mindful of that. And I think social media sometimes perpetuates that. You know, it's like, oh my God, my girlfriend's a narcissist or my boyfriend's a psychopath. Yeah, it's easy to name that, but I think we need to be a little bit more mindful about that and put on the brakes.
Well, hold on. I kind of got to hold your feet to the fire here.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of your videos, the content of your videos is essentially, if I was to give it a headline, is girl, leave him. He does this, you know, bitch, bye.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, aren't you perpetuating what you're saying that you have an issue with?
No, absolutely. Thank you for putting that question out there. Look, I have two answers to that. First of all, if you look in my video, 15 seconds, you can never reach everyone's understanding within 15 seconds.
Do longer videos.
Well, that's YouTube. I don't have time for that. I would love to. If anyone wants to help me, I would love to get more on YouTube. But the 15-second video, I understand that you can't always meet everyone's understanding. Everyone has a different perspective to that. So what's one thing I do that I don't see many people do at all is I have a comment section. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And in that comment section, I go deeper into the topic. And
Yeah, but you know what people do on TikTok is they swipe.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
How many people are reading the nuance in the comment?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I'm going to come to that in a second. So that's one element. So people that know my content know that I give depth to a lot of things. And even sometimes in my comment section, I actually put in some scientific references so that people can read. Because what I like to do on social media is to make complex things easier to understand and also to provide some depth where possible. Now, you talked about the fun stuff. So one thing that I learned, and one of the reasons for why I got on social media, I think this is really important to know, I was challenged with a question in 2021. Ali, you're our only behavioral scientist. You're the only one that can help us figure out how do we reach Gen Z in the classroom? We have a really hard time reaching Gen Z in the classroom, their understanding of things, etc. So I went out on social media to better understand how can I reach that generation in the classroom, right? What do we need to do? Attention spans are lower, content consumption is different. So we started to apply those strategies in a different way in the classroom to see what could be more effective. And then eventually I got online and someone said, why don't you make your own content? I never intended to be on social media. But then I eventually thought, hey, my role in life or my purpose in life is I want to make the world a better place. You can do that one-to-one, but you can also do that in a classroom. But in social media, you can have a much more bigger impact in that perspective. But I understood from social media that, me going and being Professor Dr. Ali Fenwick and giving the insights in psychology to people is not going to really land with an Instagram or a TikTok. So the idea behind this is how can you transform complex ideas and theory into fun and engaging content that people can relate to, and they're willing to kind of slow down their thinking and engage with the content. So I call it infotainment, right? It's not, I'm not putting out scientific papers here, but I call it infotainment because it's informational, but it's entertaining to meet the people where they are. And sometimes humor is a really great soft landing to meet people where they are. And that's the feedback that I've gotten back over the many, many years that I've been doing this. And it's a unique spot. So yes, I make fun about life. I make fun about relationships, and that's okay because the people that know generally that the content that I put out there, there's depth to it. But I do that in a fun way that people want to engage with that content.
Well, speaking of depth and nuance, I just want to close with this before we open it up to questions from the audience. What's the difference between being toxic and just being kind of an asshole?
Oh, that's a great question. There's two differences. Being an asshole is something that I would say is sometimes very subjective. Being toxic, well, again, there's certain behaviors that it makes you say that someone is an asshole. But toxic behaviors are observable behaviors that you can measure. For example, you can look at. So, for example, you can say, well, that person's gaslighting or manipulating me or being abusive. Those are clear indicators of what we can consider. And again, the word toxic is also, we can question that in the definition. But it's a term that we all have come to use in today's world. And, again, we can find some behaviors toxic about people, but we wouldn't call people an asshole. And I think that, again, is someone's opinion and subjective perspective to somebody. But again, toxic behaviors are something that we can definitely define a little bit better.
Okay, fair enough. I know it's a pretty exciting topic, so I want to open it up to the floor now. If you've got a question, please raise your hand. We'll get a microphone over to you. Yes, we've got the woman in the glasses there. Yep, perfect.
Thank you very much for your talk here. The question I have for you is, what is the difference between red flags and green flags and Daniel Kahneman's idea of thinking fast and slow? Because they seem to have an awful lot of similarities.
Well, it's interesting. The late Daniel Kahneman was a wonderful contributor to the field of behavioral economics and our understanding of psychology in the field of economics. And his System 1 and System 2, kind of what's called the dual processing system in psychology, basically indicates that most of our decision making we do automatic. We don't think about it. And we're creatures of habit. So 85 to 90% of our behaviors, we don't think about it. We just do it without knowing that we're doing it. And the other 15% of like the more reflective, or 20% reflective part of our brain, we kick in when we want to try and think about something. And by the way, our brain, for us to know, is super lazy. We're really, really lazy as human beings, right? And so we don't realize that, but we are. And so therefore, the flags are there to sometimes give us the quick and easy answers, right? When we actually, well, for example, with red flags, when we see something we don't like in somebody, what can happen to us? Again, remember one thing. Our brain was made for survival. Our brain wasn't made for success. So our brain helps us to keep us safe. And the moment we see a red flag, which means danger, warning, watch out, we have an automatic reaction, an emotional reaction to something. So we're like, oh, let me run. So often red flags, I would say, are impulsive and emotional and kind of that system one thinking approach. And so therefore, I want people to kind of put on the brakes, metaphorically put on the brakes, take a step back and reflect, engage, and then decide what you need to do with it. The green flags, on the other hand, are behaviors that we see in people, so genuine, reliable, empathetic, elevating, and nurturing behaviors. And I think we evaluate that much more from a System 2 perspective. I've actually never thought about explaining it that way, so I'm really happy you explained that, but that would be my 2 cents on trying to kind of connect the dots. Yeah. Wonderful guy that was. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Do we have anyone from this side?
Thank you so much. So, when men become older, and more successful, their dating pool is growing, and they're becoming like, oh, such a green flag for the dating pool they have.
Well, thank you.
At the same time, when women become older and more successful, their dating pool is shrinking,
Yes.
and they're like, oh, a red flag,
Yes.
strong personality.
Right.
What do we do to change this narrative, and should we?
Look, wonderful question. So let's bring this back to biology. Right? So if in the book Red Flags, Green Flags, I actually talk about interest in people, and I talk about cheating, and I talk about who do we find attractive. What's very interesting, according to various studies, a woman's most attractive time or most interesting time is, I think the peak is around 26 and 27, biologically. Yeah? Interest. And then that's the cross point. For men, you know what their most highest level is, their peak time as a man in terms of attraction?
When they're dead.
No. That's when you have the if there's a will in place. But for a man, do you have any idea what it is? 46 to 48. So a man's perceived value goes up to that age. I'm 48, by the way, just to give you an answer. And for a woman, it's lower. So the dating pool goes down for women over time and up for men over time. Now, what's interesting, I think the thing that I really love, and I write about this in the book, I write about how women, more successful women, older women, can actually be much more successful in dating. I write about that in the book. And I touch upon different aspects. So even as a woman yourself, I explain some of the benefits of dating older, right? There are various benefits. And also, what's also very interesting, according to the data that comes from mobile, I'll tell you something really fascinating about human behavior. When you speak with one-to-one people, you kind of have an understanding of how people actually behave. But if you check out the data from mobile dating apps, oh my God, what they tell you about human behavior, wow, wow, wow. Here's one little insight that some dating apps share. Women 40s and 50s get hit on more by guys 22 to 26. Relatable? Okay. So then often the reaction comes and says, oh, I don't want to date that. But I explain also the benefits of that as well in the book. So I don't think it's a red flag. I think also we have to understand, because let's think about the impact of cinema and literature, right? When we think of American Pie, we think of, who's the older lady there? Stifler's mom. Remember that? Stifler's mom. And how is she positioned? How is Stifler's mom often positioned in cinema? As a Kruger, right? And I think that mentality that cinema is how it's impacting is a not good thing. But I think there are many great examples of age-desperate couples, such as Emmanuel Macron, though he's a bit in the news right now, with Brigitte Macron. But again, an example, it's not a great example, but again, there's age differences where with women, for example, older with younger men, and there are more and more of those coming out. And I think we need to have more role models. Ashton Kutcher, right? Together, I forgot what was
Demi Moore.
Demi Moore. Great, so many different examples of where we can see more role models of older women together with younger men, in the 20s, 30s, or whatever, and that they can actually be in a happy, successful relationship. And I think we need more role models. Does that make sense? Yeah.
That's a great question. We have time for one more question.
Right.
Yes, we've got this.
So my question is, what do you think of the validity of attachment theory? What are your views on attachment theory? Is there such a thing as an avoidant or anxious attachment style, or it really is just behaviors that are more niche and are to specific situations?
Yeah. So attachment, Bowlby's attachment style, the originator of the theory, which eventually started to seep into the relational sphere to help better understand how people develop their relationships with people. Now, I'm a big believer of attachment styles, right? And the Bowlby's initial theory developed on the lines of child development and how parents and child develop their relationships together, and the understanding that sometimes if a child gets neglected or not given the right attention, not validated, that eventually you develop what they call an insecure attachment style. And so there's a lot of scientific evidence out there that shows that once people's attachment styles have been measured, there were often indicators for misbehaviors, personality disorders, and other kind of outcomes in that perspective. I'm a big believer in that. I do believe it. I do believe that people have an anxious attachment style, so for example, or avoidant. So anxious, like, oh, I don't want to lose you, kind of that codependency. But it can be a very avoidant, kind of like they want to be with you, but when the emotions they come up, then eventually you kind of push them away. Well, you want it deep down inside, you want to be loved. But then because when the emotions become real and you've never had that experience, you push that kind of person away. So I think from explaining relationship dynamics and independent individual behaviors in the romantic atmosphere, in the romantic domain, I think it provides a lot of deep understanding and also how it relates to more maladaptive behaviors over time. Now, is the quadrant, because I think there's 3 or 4, dismissive, avoidant also, or disorganized, I think that was the other attachment style as well. I think it's the research in that field is only increasing, but does it explain everything? No. And the thing about human behavior is super complex. That's why when I make a video, I can only give one perspective to what that behavioral outcome could be. Could be an inner child thing, could be attachment styles, whatnot, but it's not a definitive, right, in that perspective. So, yes, answering your question, I believe in attachment styles. I think it helps us to better understand why people are insecure in their relationships, in terms of bonding with other people. My own PhD, by the way, was in looking at psychological attachment, but specifically also in workplaces. And so I came up with a new kind of mechanism to help explain how we create attachment. So again, there are multiple levels of developing attachment with people. And also, I'm writing a new book now where I look at the psychological impact of AI and how do we develop attachment to artificial intelligence. That's even more interesting. But more to come in the next book, hopefully next year.
That was a great question, and a great one to end on as well.
Can we do one last thing?
Sure.
Would you like to be on social media with a quick hello? Yeah? Can we do that together?
Yeah, let's do it.
I love doing that. 1 second. Sid, you want to join me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Where do you want me?
We'll do this. And then when I turn around, you guys are going to go like, okay, make sense? Okay, let's go.
All right.
Okay, we just had a wonderful talk, Sid and I, here at Brain Bar in Budapest. Sid, thank you so much for the interview.
You're awesome. You're a badass.
Thank you so much. But you know what, guys? This is what you missed. That could have been louder. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone.
Everyone, Ali Fenwick. Yeah. Take care. Thank you so much.